Hey guys, what's up? It's me again, and I have managed to put together a little POB for the 3.17 version of Cold EK Deadeye, which for some reason has ended up to be the most popular video on my little channel. So yeah, I just thought I'd update the build and provide a quick update for you guys and share the POB as well. So for those of you who don't know, Cold EK Deadeye is just a Deadeye spellcaster build. You take Tailwind, you use EK with Ring of Blades to fire in a circle, and then you take Ricochet to make them chain around and bounce off of walls, and you convert all the damage to cold, and it ends up to be a pretty fun build that's really good at clearing. And of course, with 3.17, EK has received around a 45% more damage buff. So previously, while the build was really weak for single target, I think that now its single target is actually quite good with the recent numerical buffs and the updates to the skill tree. So yeah, I've put together a 3.17 Cold EK Deadeye build here, and as you can see here, we have 2 million Shaper DPS, and we are actually at a 4.5k life pool, which is about 500 more than I had in the last video that I played this build. And yeah, that's basically the build. Just run around, shoot EK in a circle. There's not too much that's different. I guess I'll start just by talking about the tree. So most of the build is basically the same. We're going to be taking Ricochet for chain, Gathering Winds for Tailwind, Wind Ward for a little bit of reduced damage taken, and then we're going to take Focal Point to scale the damage of Sniper's Mark. And then as for the rest of the tree, we're just going to be scaling the same things. We are crit, so we're going to be scaling crit chance and crit multi. And then of course we scale cold damage, physical as extra cold. We scale projectile damage, elemental damage, cast speed. And then of course we take these 2 RMR clusters here, which are really good. And taking these 2 clusters allows us to run Hatred, level 20 Val Clarity, Zealotry, and Herald Device, which gives us a pretty big damage boost to have all these auras together without the need for Enlighten. Yeah, that's basically the build. So most of this tree is basically just the same as I had in the previous video, but I think the main differences are just the masteries, the RMR clusters, and this new Mark cluster here. So again, the RMR clusters just give us a little bit more room to fit a couple more auras into our build. And then as for masteries, not many of them are special. We just take percent life, flat life, physical converted to cold, which is the same as was on the tree before. And then intensity, +1 max intensity, which is also the same as before. There is a little new mastery here, gain physical damage as random, which is pretty good. And then take a little mana mastery here to fit some more auras in. And then I guess the only new piece of content here is this mark wheel, which is really conveniently located. And this just gives us a little bit of crit chance and increased damage dealt to a marked enemy, which of course we're going to be using Sniper's Mark. And there's a mark mastery here that increases the effect of your marks, which is pretty good for damage, although I think there's also a new mastery coming in where you can gain Frenzy Charge on hit for a marked enemy. That could also be pretty interesting, but we'll have to see if that's good or not. And yeah, that's basically it. Most of the tree is basically the same. As for the skills, again, I don't want to go into too much detail here because I do have a build guide video of this already, but just to talk about the links a little bit, most of it here is just going to be the same. I have a level 21 EK here and a level 4 Empower because this is kind of an endgame build. I would definitely not recommend this as a league starter because it requires very specific itemization. And if you want to play this build, I'd assume you have like either 10 to 20x if you're playing Trade League to get the pieces of this build together, or if you're playing SSF, maybe give yourself like 1 to 3 weeks to farm the gear for this build if you're gonna play this in SSF if you're crazy like me. But yeah, as for the links, it's pretty straightforward. We just have EK and then pinpoint for single target damage, spell echo to have a lot better of map clear, and then we take inspiration here, increased crit chance, more elemental damage, and reduced mana cost. And then we take cold penetration here to get a little bit more damage, and then finally we have empower at level 4 ideally to give us a lot more gem level. I would really recommend playing this build with the level 21 EK and Empower 4, because the build is still rather weak compared to how much you have to invest to get it going, which is its weakness in my opinion. But if you have an Empower 3, it is still playable, but you lose like 10% damage. And then if you don't have Empower at all, if you didn't find it in SSF or something, you could substitute Empower for Hypothermia. You do lose quite a bit of damage, like 25%, but it is still playable like this. But yeah, I would really recommend getting Empower if you can. As for other important gem links, again, we have the Aura setup here. Here we have Hatred for physical as extra cold and more cold damage. And then we have level 20 Valclarity for mana sustain. Then we have Zealotry giving us increased spell crit chance and more spell damage, which is a really good aura. And then here we have 2 Herald auras that are both optional. I have this Herald of Ice here because I think Herald of Ice is really good for mapping. After the nerf of Explode Chest, I think this build was hit kind of hard because EK doesn't really have a good way to clear except for using an Explode Chest, but now that it's nerfed, I just don't know if it's worth it anymore. So I thought that putting in a Herald of Ice was a good idea, just to help with wave clear. It doesn't increase our damage by that much. If you see here, it doesn't increase our damage by that much. As you can see, if I toggle this on and off, it only gives us like 35k total DPS compared to 2 million. So it's not the best for a single target, but I do think it'll help out mapping quite a bit. And then I also have Herald of Purity here, which gives 12% more physical damage. And I figure like if you're fighting a boss or something, you can just take off Herald of Ice and put on Herald of Purity. Just quickly swap that to gain like 12% more physical damage. Although it says 13% here for some reason, but it's 12 or 13% more physical damage. In any case, it's better than Herald of Ice by quite a bit. But yeah, that's basically the aura setup. And then another little innovation that I came up with in this build was to run a 4-link vortex like this. And this has a couple of functions. The most important one here is to link vortex to Bone Chill, which allows enemies to take increased cold damage based on your chill effect. And then we scale that chill effect with Unbound Ailment. So we just run around and we put Vortex on our left mouse button so it auto triggers. And then any enemy that stands in it is going to get chilled, and that chill is going to be amplified, and then they're going to take increased cold damage taken based on the amount of that chill. And then we also link an Arcane Surge here to help us get a little bit more damage and also mana regen, which will always be up because this is, auto cast on left mouse button. And it actually does provide a pretty substantial damage boost. If we toggle our vortex on and off, you'll see that our EK damage goes from 2 million all the way down to 1.6. So by doing this, you get like 25% more damage. And it's actually not that hard to get a boss to be in the vortex. Like if you're fighting Cirrus, for example, all you need to do is just like micro walk around him and he's going to be permanently in the vortex, which is pretty good. It's pretty cool. So there's that. And then other than that, we just have Dash Second Wind for movement, and then CWDT Immortal Call for a little bit of defense. And as for the buffs and debuffs, I just have Frost Bomb here, of course, to apply exposure. And then I have Sniper's Mark here to help us scale our projectile damage. In 3.17, I believe there's going to be a new mark on hit support, which is definitely going to be really good. So I would definitely recommend running that in this build as well, so we automate the casting of Sniper's Mark. And then I just have some random support gems here that are completely optional. You could link faster casting and increased duration to Frost Bomb to make it better. And then you could also run Val Haste and Val Grace, and then just save them for like taking down map bosses really fast, which is what I like to do personally. So that's also an option. And yeah, that's basically the gem setup. It's not too much different. The main thing that's different is just the different auras and the different vortex thing here. So yeah. As for items, all of this is basically the same. We're still going to be using a +3 spell bow. If you want to know how to craft this, feel free to check out my other video. I go into crafting in more detail there. And then we just have a Crusader quiver that converts damage to cold. And then, -9 res helmet. The chest is going to be a little bit different because we no longer use explode chest. So I would just recommend using additional curse and power charge on crit, which is Hunter and Crusader. I think that just gives us the most possible damage while allowing us to run Frostbite and Sniper's Mark together. And then gloves, you just, Syndicate Unveil gloves, 35% converted to cold. And then boots are just Redeemer boots that have physical damage as extra cold, get a little bit more damage. Amulet is exactly the same. We anoint Arcane Potency for a crit, and then we just get an amulet that's Warlord Hunter with Dex gems and Fizz gems, although I don't know how easy it's going to be to get this next league, because these gem mods are no longer influence locked, so you can't just use a Woke Orb. I don't know if it's going to be easy to craft a +2 amulet in the next league, but I guess we'll have to see. And then for rings, one of them is going to be Frostbite on hit, and the other one can be whatever. Here in the PoB, I just have cold damage leech as life. I figure this build doesn't really have a good way to sustain life on bosses, so I figure just throw in a little bit of life leech. You could also just run something else like a frenzy ring, minimum frenzy charges or frenzy on kill, or just like an essence ring with cold damage. Basically anything works. And then for the bases, I just prefer using opal rings for the increased damage. And and then for the belt, we just, whatever belt you can get, ideally a Redeemer Stygian Vice with cold damage. And then for the jewel, maybe just get like a Searching Eye jewel with life and crit multi. And then one other thing I should probably mention is this build has always been very hard to sustain mana on. And I personally have always had a lot of issues to sustain mana, even though we run level 20 Clarity, and even though we use Inspiration support and we take an additional mana wheel here. I have found it difficult to sustain mana, so I haven't really found a way around that other than to take 3 Elrion crafts here. I just take 3 crafts on my amulet and the 2 rings to have -7 to mana cost. I personally have not found a way around this other than just by doing this, but feel free to let me know if you do find something that works better. That's basically it. And then of course we use Ring of Blades here to fire EK in a circle, which we just put here, right here, because there's 40 decks around here. That's basically the build. There's really not much else to say here. I think it'll be pretty good. This build has always been really good for doing things like Ritual, Legion, Breach, mapping. It's just been a really fun build to play for me personally, because you can just stand in one spot and shoot EK in a circle, and it chains off of everything, and it looks pretty cool. And of course, now with the 45% damage buff to EK and the new tree, I do believe that this build is going to be able to hit 3 mil DPS, which is, it's not great, but it's cold EK Deadeye. It's not going to be like the best boss killer ever, but I do think that this build is going to hit 3 mil DPS with this current setup, and I think 3 mil DPS is generally enough to take down some endgame bosses. You can probably beat Cortex. You can probably take down Cirrus 8 pretty easily with 3 mil. And then of course we have a huge chill effect as well, right? Because we have a crit EK with 510 base damage, and when we crit with this, it's going to inflict a giant freaking chill or freeze, which is going to slow down bosses a lot. So yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty fun build, and we're going to run around pretty fast with Tailwind as well. I will try to build this next league as well, and I'll post updates if I do, but other than that, just wanted to make this quick little video to share the POB and to share some new findings with this build with you guys. So yeah, I think that's going to be it. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'll try to answer as many comments as I can. And yeah, thanks for watching.